Hello Year 4, and today is Wednesday, what are we on? Wednesday the 24th of February, and this is your reading lesson. Okay, so we began reading Raider's Peril. So previously what had happened, we found out that actually it's a girl called Katka and she's playing a video game, isn't she? Where they are trying to take down, is it the Gutvine stronghold? Who is led by a boy in her class, I believe. Okay, so it's come to the end. They'd managed to, what's the chapter called? Double Life. Towards the end, they managed to take down the Gutvine stronghold, and then they burnt it down. And as it was burning down, the Gutvine tribe began, and they thought they'd won, but then the other tribe began collecting up all the ash. And just as it was getting good, Milana, was it Katka's little sister, turned off the computer game so she couldn't carry on and see what happened. Okay, so we're going to look at chapter 2, Clever Clown. So before we read that, I'm going to go to the questions. Okay, so chapter 2, Clever Clown. So these questions are to think about whilst reading. So we've got, why did Katka march into the classroom? Why do you think the chapter is titled Clever Clown? And who is the leader of the Gutvine Guild? Okay, question 3. So if you make a note of those and have a think, they are to think about whilst reading. I'm also going to give you the questions for after, because I think you found it a bit difficult looking at those questions after reading the chapter. So I'm also going to put these questions up as a worksheet as well, okay, in your portfolio section. So if you want to make a note of them or look in the portfolio section for the questions, I'll put this exact slide into there. So you've got to answer these questions. How would you describe Katka and Jaden's relationship? Why do you think the class was shocked when Jaden answered the teacher's question correctly? Why do you think Jaden said, why would I tell someone who's stupid enough to score an own goal? And number 4, what was Jaden messing around with? 5, how do you think the teacher, Mrs. Gorman, is feeling? Oh, and that's chapter 3. So you can make a note of those questions, and then we're going to read through chapter 2, Clever Clown, or you can, as I said, I will put a copy of these questions in your portfolio. Okay, so I'm going to go to the chapter 2 now. Chapter 2, Clever Clown. What was that about, said Katka, marching into the classroom the next morning. She threw her book bag under the peg and made a beeline for Jaden's table. Jaden had a large rubber and a pair of safety scissors on the desk in front of him. He was attempting to hack the rubber into some sort of shape with the blunt blades. What was what about? He said, not looking at Katka. His black hair was too long and it hung over his face, which probably made not looking at people loads easier. He twisted the handles of the scissors so hard that the rubber pinged out and nearly hit Katka in the eye. Last night on Raider's Peril, Katka persisted, grabbing the mutilated rubber before Jaden could. You just stood back and let the Gutvine stronghold burn to the ground. What are you, stupid or something? Scared? Jaden laughed. The Gutvines aren't scared of anything. He made a lunge for the rubber in Katka's hand, but she jumped backwards. It's the Brittle Stars who are cowards, raiding a stronghold that's not even defended. You chose not to defend it. We expected you to fight back. We're not cowards. Still, not exactly a great win, is it? Torching an undefended stronghold. Jaden actually looked up at her. The smug glint in his brown eyes made Katka feel like the glory of last night was leaking out through her toes. "But why didn't you defend it? It was a brutal defeat. You lost everything." Jaden smiled. "We got exactly what we wanted, all part of Zircon's plan. Now give me that." He lunged for the rubber again. Katka took another step back and nearly crashed into Dom and VJ, who were rushing to sit down. "Who's Zircon and what's his plan? Why would I tell someone who's stupid enough to score an own goal?" Heat rushed to Katka's face and her skin tingled. "That's nothing to do with," she spluttered, "and anyway, I wouldn't have if..." But Jaden didn't let her finish. "Gut-fine business, isn't it?" "Fine." Kafka took a deep breath. Jaden was never going to let that own goal go. "What is this meant to be anyway?" "I'm carving a diamond axe. Give. Looks more like a mutant toothbrush. Katka, give it back before..." The classroom door clicked open. Katka tossed the rubber onto Jaden's desk. It bounced on the blue tabletop and Jaden snatched it. "Yes, Jaden!" Mrs. Gorman stood in the doorway, her face as red as their school sweatshirts. Uh-oh. Katka darted across the classroom to her own seat. When she looked back at Jaden, his hair completely covered his face and his hands were tucked guiltily beneath the desk. "You will hand over whatever you are hiding immediately," said Mrs. Gorman, striding to Jaden's desk with her hand held out. "I'm not hiding anything," he said, leaning back defensively. It's a rubber, Mrs. Gorman," said Amanda, who had the misfortune of sitting next to Jaden. Mrs. Gorman raised her eyebrows and waited. "Oh, look, how did that get there?" said Jaden, lifting the rubber out from under the table. "I don't know how it all got cut up, Mrs. Gorman. I just found it, honest." Mrs. Gorman took the rubber silently, walked to her desk and threw it in the waste bin. "Jaden will be staying in at break to write a letter to the head teacher. In the letter, he will discuss why he is not allowed to destroy school property and explain how he intends to pay the school back this time. Now line up, our first lesson is in the computer suite." As the class pushed their seats under their desks and shuffled to the door, Katka noticed Jaden dart to Mrs. Gorman's desk. He reached into the bin and slipped the rubber into his pocket. Great, Jaden was going to ruin their computing lesson too. Katka liked the computer suite. It was cooler and less cluttered than the rest of the school. Today the class was starting a new unit on programming websites. "Does anyone know what HTML stands for?" said Mrs. Gorman, writing the letters on the board. Only one hand went up, Jaden's. Mrs. Gorman looked at Jaden. She pursed her lips. Jaden wiggled his fingers a little and waited. Mrs. Gorman turned to the rest of the class. "Why doesn't everyone tell a partner what they think HTML might stand for?" she said. Everyone spoke at once. "How to make lemonade," suggested Rick, who was sitting on Katka's left. "No, how to make lasers," said VJ on the other side. His eyes shone wide with anticipation. "Happy tortoises," said Katka. She chewed her lip and thought. "Meow loudly." "That was nothing to do with computers," said Rick. "Neither does lemonade," she retorted. "And tortoises don't meow," added VJ. "I know that. Happy tortoises munch loudly would make sense," VJ continued. "I used to have a pet tortoise. She did a lot of munching." When the class fell silent, Jaden was still the only one with his hand up. "Yes, Jaden," said Mrs. Gorman warily. "HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language," he said. "That's right, well done, Jaden." Katka could tell Mrs. Gorman was surprised by the careful rise and fall of her voice. Mrs. Gorman wrote Hypertext Markup Language on the board. "And what does HTML do?" Jaden's hand was the only one raised again. "Go on," said Mrs. Gorman. "It's how you program a web page to show words and pictures and links and stuff." "You know, Jaden, it's taken 7 years, but at last you've found your calling. Jaden is correct, class, and today we're going to be learning some basic HTML to make our own websites." It was a good lesson. Katka paired up with Amanda, and they created almost an entire page about the girls' football team. Afterwards, she looked for Jaden. To Katka's surprise, the rubber had stayed a misshapen lump against his thigh. He hadn't touched it once. Katka almost felt sorry for reducing his guild stronghold to ash. The feeling didn't last. After break they had maths. As Katka attempted a long multiplication question involving decimals, a crack disturbed the low chatter in the classroom. Jaden sat stunned. The rubber lay on the desk before him, looking even less like a diamond axe and even more like a mutant toothbrush. In his hands, Jaden held 2 halves of the safety scissors, which had mysteriously snapped into 2. "You'll be paying for new scissors as well as a new rubber then," said Mrs. Gorman, confiscating both and shutting them in her desk drawer. "I hope you've saved up plenty of pocket money, Jaden. You're going to need it." Okay, well there we go. So we'll go back to those questions. They will be uploaded into your class portfolio so you can have a look at them, and hopefully you'll find the answers to those and upload to Class Dojo. Okay, that's all for now, and then Friday we will look at Chapter 3, Worthless Ash. Okay, so see you later then, Year 4.